There's a lot of racial problems in this school right here. I ain't racial no, but when a lot of white people look at me this wrong way, I get kind of mad.
Black kids, some of them are brought up to hate white people, not to trust them. And some white kids are brought up the same way.
It's part of life. Everywhere you go, you're going to hear some kind of prejudice.
It's a natural segregation. People feel that they are different from other people. Maybe that's not imposed, but people feel that I'm different from you.
Hello, my name is Jerry Riby, and welcome to Soapbox. This week's program deals with the topic of racial attitudes. How do young people really feel about the problem of racial discrimination? And what do they feel are some of the causes and solutions? And to talk about it are 7 high school students. Let's start by, a lot of adults have indicated that when they look at young people today, they feel the problems of racial attitudes have worked out. Is that true?
No, not at all.
Okay, let's start with Michelle.
Well, some problems have been worked out, but for the most part, there's still this big difference that separates people from each other. And it's going to be with us forever as long as they're blacks, whites, Chinese, Yugoslavs, or whatever. It's still there. And as long as you just point someone out because they're white, it's going to be here.
Well, I think another problem is that America is a very young country, and people, as blacks, were gotten out of slavery only in the latter part of the 1800s, and only in the 1960s did legislation pass laws that didn't discriminate against blacks or minorities as a whole. And people are expecting such a fast change in only 25 years when this has been going on for 200 years, and you can't expect something like that to happen overnight. And many people are being very unrealistic in how to approach the situation and how to solve. Yes, on both sides.
Okay.
Feeling that they can just...
How do you respond, though, to the argument that, when you look back historically, various groups of people come into the United States, and you have what has been called the melting pot theory. Why do you feel that the frustrations still seem, or many people argue, why can't blacks and whites melt in much better than has been done in the past? Okay, let's go to Tarantha, and we'll come to John.
Okay, first of all, seeing as how the blacks were brought over here in the first place, they were brought over here as indentured servants or slaves. They were forced to come over here, such as Germans or Italians. They came over here on their free will, They weren't forced to come over here. And it's not very easily, you can't easily point out an Italian and say, that's an Italian. You have to, all you know is that's a white person. But when you say a black person, you definitely know that that is a black person. You can identify him as a black person, but you can't identify nobody as a Jew unless you know their name, or you can categorize their name, or else you know that person personally, and you know their religion. Other than that, you cannot categorize people. That's how you can see a black, and you can point them out, and you're black, and that's how you can discriminate real easily.
It's not easy for us to
Okay,
maintain.
let's take John.
Well, one thing, because the blacks were brought over by force, there's a constant ongoing feeling among a lot of blacks that this shouldn't have happened to me. I should have been able to come over by my own free will. And they continue, this is only some, you can't really say everyone, but some feel it's still their right to rebel against this because now there is still discrimination and they just feel that it shouldn't be happening to them. Because
I think that
go ahead, Julie.
A larger majority of black people have accepted the fact, all right, they're black, they were brought over here, there is a problem, but I think they have accepted that problem and learned to deal with it a lot better than white people have. Personally, I feel like now it's time for white people to try to accept the fact that blacks are here and that blacks are going to be here, and that we have to, get along and we have to work together.
Okay, let's take Elizabeth. We'll come back to John.
When you look at the problems, too, about, the melting pot theory, if you just look back at when the blacks were freed, the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil War, they were freed from slavery but then the proper steps weren't taken to acclimate them to society. They were just freed from their masters, and then they were just said,
They had
okay,
nothing.
that's right. They had no
education.
education. They had no background to meet the world of the whites, and so from that they took a step backwards in a sense, and only now we're starting to make up for what happened.
I think it wasn't. It's only been that much harder.
Okay, now let's go back here to John.
There's one thing I wanted to point out is there's another big feeling that, and this is among all Americans, everyone wants the same as someone else. If they see a person with a nice new car, they want that new car. It doesn't matter how they get it, but they deserve it. They're an American. They're free. Now everyone is free, so they deserve what any other person wants. And I think a lot of the rebellious attitudes and the bad attitudes that a lot of people have, black and white, is that more among the blacks, is that, this is just some blacks, that they feel that anytime they don't have what another person has, it is their right to be given that. It doesn't mean they have to work for it or anything. It just means that they should be given it.
Or else they're
Or else it's called discrimination if they don't get it.
Okay, let's take a response, Michelle.
Coming from the inner city, most blacks come up with the opinion that I'm black by my environment, by the color of my skin, by the nature of my heritage. I'm going to be deprived. Most get into the attitude that regardless of how hard I work, I'm never going to get that Seville that I want or that Mercedes. Because why? I have the white man on my back holding me back. It's not right, but that's how it is by your environment. What can we do to help bring this change about?
I think you need very positive role models
right.
who know that that's not true. You have to have a very positive attitude. If you're very negative, because a product of your background where no matter what I do, no matter how hard I work, I won't get what I really want, then you won't get what you want. You need a very positive attitude, and you need to be very realistic. You have to be realistic. First of all, you have to accept that many minorities are discriminated against. You accept that, and then you have that drive and the ambition in your personal life or perhaps in others that you know to strive to not to maintain that idea and to strive
okay, but we
for
have to
bettering
look at
yourself.
there are some negative feelings. I mean, maybe people here can get along, but going back, John, I want to ask you a question on what you said. Do you feel, though, in fact, that there are whites who feel today that blacks are getting too much of the advantage? Situation?
I think, I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what I think is going on. I think a lot of whites believe that that's the way the blacks are thinking. They're thinking they deserve everything an upper-class white has, and so they get down on the blacks or the people who are helping out the blacks because they feel that they're giving something that they don't even have to work.
Okay, and this gets us into some of the things that Michelle.
What those people miss is the fact that blacks do deserve. They deserve the chance to try to get those things. And so often I hear so many whites saying, well, blacks get everything. Blacks get that. Blacks get this. But if you really look at it, how much have blacks gotten in the past 25 years since the civil rights movements?
There's one thing about that, though. There is a lot of factual evidence that now there's a major push for giving to blacks so that they can move up in society. And I'm not saying this is wrong. All I'm saying is that a lot of people don't like this big input of
affirmative action, things like that. Okay.
When it was in
Libby?
To go back to what John said, that these black people and white people are saying, we want what the upper class people have. But if you look back in history, it's just now, and it's just in the 60s with Martin Luther King. When he came out, he said, this is wrong. Putting black people in the back of the bus and everything like that.
Yeah,
he said, this is wrong. Not only bus, but he came out. So now, if you look back, you can almost empathize with these people who are saying, we want more, okay? We're not saying that, just give it to them. I think that if they really want it, they'll be willing to work for it. And I think that that's what the idea of the civil rights movement and this whole idea was.
All right, let's take a brief pause and let's look at how some people feel out in the field. And then we'll come back and look a little bit more in depth at does equality really exist? Are we going too far to balance it? We'll talk about the affirmative action programs, busing, and then some of our own personal lives, interracial dating and things like that. So we've recorded some additional comments about how people feel. Have we gone too far? Have we not out in the field during the week? Let's look at those comments and come back and discuss these other topics. So I think if we take a look at the monitor, we'll look at those comments. How about the racial problem? Does it still exist?
There's a lot of racial problems in this school right here. I ain't racial no, but when a lot of white people look at me this wrong way, I get kind of mad.
It's a natural segregation. People feel that they are different from other people. Maybe that's not imposed, but people feel that I'm different from you, and so they divide up in classrooms, they divide up in the lunchroom, and they divide out with their friends where they hang out.
Like there's a black bathroom and a white bathroom. Like there's one bathroom that's all blacks mostly, and then there's a white bathroom. Like usually black kids don't go in there, white kids don't go in the black bathroom.
Why don't they do it?
Because like it's around two different groups, and if a white kid goes in there, you'd be crazy.
If a white and a black person have a fight, a lot of people tend to think that's racial. That could be personal, If you see a white person and a black person fighting in the hallway, they say, "Oh my God, there's racial tension over there." That's not always so.
Anywhere you go, you're gonna find like if you're black, I don't like you. If you're white, I don't like you. Don't go in this area. Don't go in that area. It's part of life. Everywhere you go, you're gonna hear some kind of prejudice.
It could be even stronger in high school because. You have the KKK doing a lot of recruitment, and even in elementary schools. And I mean, I personally think it's sick.
I certainly don't feel that the KKK is any great thing, but I think that people have the right to say what they feel.
At the expense of others, they have the right to be really insulting. That's an understatement. I mean, bigotry is disgusting. I mean, when you think about it, there you are saying somebody else is inferior, and inferior is a terrible thing to say about somebody else. Just simply because of the color.
What about affirmative action programs? Are they good? Are they necessary? Do we still need them to bring about more equality in society today?
A person might say, "Oh, did I get hired for this job because I was black, or did I get hired for this job because I was qualified?" I think that question comes up in a lot of people. Whether or not they don't know if they're qualified or not. It's just because of their color or their race or whatever.
I definitely believe in affirmative action because the people that aren't white middle-class Americans or white upper-class Americans, they've been screwed for so long. I mean, if you're trying to find some sort of a balance, you can't suddenly make everything equal at different levels. You have to bring them up to par.
In certain areas, these minorities are being hired, and they may not be the best qualified persons for the job. There may be a non-minority individual who has more qualifications for the job and is being turned down because there is a minority system or quota that must be filled.
In the case where you have two high school students applying for college and they are equally qualified, I feel that the black person should be chosen simply because they probably weren't chosen sometime in their history, or their parent wasn't chosen.
Do you think it is important that various races go to school together, growing up?
They learn that they're all the same.
Let's take a couple other comments on that. Yeah.
It's so they learn that they're all the same, and we act the same, and we all do the same things together.
It's a cultural experience for all members that do, in and out between the sexes, the races. It's good.
Would you support busing?
Yeah, I think so.
In some places it will work in some of the smaller areas, but in the larger cities, blacks tend to settle with other blacks, and it seems stupid to me to ship them across town when it would be simpler just to leave them where they are, even though in a way it is segregating if you have all blacks in one area and all whites in one area.
As far as the busing and such goes, I don't know if forced integration is that a good an idea. I think it's counterproductive.
If busing's continued over a long period of time, then the kids, as they grow up together, they learn to accept each other more. I mean, the first generation of kids that are bused are going to fight probably, but if it's continued over a long time.
Some people, right, they don't like to be even seen with black and white kids. Like black kids, some of them are brought up to hate white people, not to trust them. And some white kids are brought up the same way. It's like I was brought up that way, but I don't believe in that. It's like people are the same wherever you are, what color, who cares?
How would you get blacks and whites to come together more?
I think basically they're doing everything they can right now, in the school at least. I mean, it's really up to the kids now. The teachers have done everything they can, and now it's the kids to say if they really want to be friends. Like,
go ahead.
People say things about whites, people say things about blacks, it's the same. And Chinese people, we all talk about people, like I have some black kids in my classes and stuff that I get along with, and I have some Chinese people that I get along with, but still, you talk about them anyways, it's just the way people are.
Okay, so you see there's a lot of disagreement. You have some people who feel that the equality does exist, we don't need to do anything else, and other people who feel we've got a long way to go. John, you reacted to that comment about the history.
Yeah, the one thing the person said about the history and that playing such a big part in bringing the blacks up, and we've got to correct history. There's no way you can correct it. All right, let's face it. The white people did a bad thing by bringing slaves over here, but that is all in the past. All right, there's no way you can say there's no prejudice either, but you can't erase history, and I don't think we're running in the same kind of system where blacks are treated as slaves. There is prejudice there, but I don't think it's the same type of thing, and I don't think you can keep referring, oh God.
Okay, let's go to Michelle. We'll come back.
What is the prejudice based upon? It's based upon the history. Blacks were slaves, and they were lower class citizens. So even now, they must still be. We must make amends.
Let her finish. Go ahead,
That's
Michelle.
what he means. That is what the whole basis of the problems between races is based upon. The past history, the past beliefs on what blacks were like. That's why history is important, because we can't erase what happened, but we can make amends.
Okay, Elizabeth will come back. Go ahead.
Like, I as a white person realize that black people have been discriminated against, and people of my race have done that discrimination. But why should I be punished for something that people of my race did in the past? Let's say, for example, I apply to college and a black person applies to college. Why should that black person, even if they're not as qualified as I am, be accepted because of an affirmative action program when I never did anything to discriminate against you?
Let Julie answer the question. Go ahead,
All I'm
Julie.
saying is that is a process of changing the past.
But two wrongs make a right then. I should be discriminated against to make up for past discrimination.
Let her answer. Go ahead.
No, I don't think that you should be discriminated against because of what happened 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But if you're going to try and change it, I mean, you have to do something. You have to allow accept people and black people into college, and you have to...
Even if they're not qualified?
Even if... what do you mean if they're not qualified?
Okay, let me tell you something. No, they do get in, even if they're not qualified. If a college is not going to get government assistance if they don't have a certain quota of black students, then that college is going to make sure they get that quota, whether they can find qualified students or not. And in a lot of cases, the college has to take twice as many as the quota just to ensure that a certain number will stick it out throughout the year.
Okay, let's get Lisa's response.
But it also depends on what quality school you're applying to. Now, let's say Harvard, they're not taking any Tom, Dick, and Harry, they're black or white. They are taking blacks who they feel will be able to handle the work, or if not, give them a little help so they will be handle the work. There are not so many blacks that are aching to go to college that they are wiping out a good percentage of whites who are trying to get into competitive college.
Okay.
It's just not that way.
John, do you think these affirmative action programs, these attempts, are going too far and causing more negative reaction in whites?
Well, first, with the affirmative action, I think it's going too far, because I think that's what happens in many cases, is that they do take blacks as tokens. And, all right, in some cases, like with the top schools, I don't think they do that as much. But if they cannot find the qualified students, they're going to take the person who isn't as qualified. And the one thing about going back to that history thing, I think maybe 5% of the prejudice now is based on the history. When you're brought up nowadays in these last 15, 20 years, you are not brought up with the impression, okay, the blacks were brought over as slaves and they're low life and this kind of thing. You're brought up.
I know. Your history book. Tell me what it says in your history book.
Okay, but I know from personal experience talking with others, it's not from the history books that they acquire prejudice. Because the history books...
It's not from the history books that
Julie.
you get... It's not from the history books that you get a sense of black people not coming over here on their own will. Black people how they were abused. I mean,
all right.
They don't reveal
let's
anything.
get Tarenth in here. Look at Tarenth.
Okay, in many cases, in looking at your history books, they will not... The minorities are in the history books.
It's just
they're not in the book. And if they're going to be in the book, you're going to talk about Martin Luther King, and everybody knows who Martin Luther King and Booker T. Washington. What about other greats that help out this country? In many cases, blacks should have the right to get many jobs and should have the right to get in many colleges because we help build this country. We are here, quote unquote, like Martin Luther King Jr. say, black men must learn to love the white man, and the white man must learn to love the black. the black man, because we are in America and we're here to stay, and there ain't nothing you can do about it.
Yeah,
You can't just pick us up and throw us away.
Don't you think things like affirmative action work against your race when I'm in college side by side with a black person who's not qualified, but they're there on an affirmative action program, and I'm working my butt off to try to keep the aid that I'm getting because I have to keep my grades up to a certain standard. And the other student, and this is true, my sister goes to school with a black student who is there on an affirmative action program who is not qualified. That student has to get like a D average to keep their aid. And my sister has to get like a B plus average to keep her aid. My sister's not a prejudiced
that's
person
an individual
but don't you
situation
think
now.
No, it's not. Throughout the whole school, there's situations like this.
Okay, we don't. It's not important that situation. You believe that situation exists.
Yes, and it causes such bad feelings with the whites against the blacks that they are getting something for nothing. And I think affirmative action works against the blacks.
Okay, let's get Terrence's response.
I see what you're saying.
In many cases, like you go to cathedral, right?
Yeah.
And you have to pay to go to the cathedral, right? Because do you think a lot of black people can take money out of their pocket that's in their students of private school? You probably learned to write a term paper when you were in the 5th grade. You know when I learned to write a term paper? When I got in high school in 11th grade. That's when they taught me. That's how come when I get ready to go to college, I'm not qualified. Because people aren't teaching us what we need to know. And in many cases, the black student can't be qualified to get to school because nobody's teaching us. So we got to get a chance somewhere.
Lower. Start in kindergarten. Use the affirmative action in kindergarten and start with
busing, etc.
Yeah, in kindergarten, but don't try to make up for it when the student is 18
Okay, let's go on, Michelle.
I know in Detroit when we had busing, I don't think we ever had forced busing. White parents took their children out of the Detroit public schools and put them in private schools. With the white children leaving, the money left, the good teachers left. So what were we black children left with? We were left with teachers who at times didn't give a damn if you learned or not. And that is why when they get ready to go to college, they're not prepared.
They're not prepared.
How are you going to be given a chance?
Okay, let's come over and get John's response, John.
That is right. Everyone will admit that is wrong. Every
not
student.
Everyone.
Well, okay.
I admit that
all
that's
right,
wrong.
there are
a lot of people do not admit that's wrong.
That's I know.
Okay. All right, but John, you
the fact remains that there is prejudice in education because just what you said. If the money leaves, the good teachers leave. But I think what Liz is saying is that you cannot start affirmative action at such a higher level of education and but schooling we're in the schooling part of your life, when you get up to the college, that's the last leg of your journey in education.
So what are they going to do after that?
Yeah, what about black people's now?
That's how
you cut off
a lot.
If you cut off the affirmative action now, you say don't put the blacks in there now. Then what are they going to do?
She's not saying cut out in affirmative action. She's saying you have to modify it because you can't have the system where just to fill a quota you take anyone you can find.
Okay, and you're basically saying, John, that results in a reverse attitude, reverse discrimination.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with affirmative action if you put in qualified people or people who have the potential to be very qualified people. In many cases, I feel that people are blowing this out of proportion in the sense that in the cases that are brought to our attention, it's always the case where the person wasn't qualified. There are many cases where people are qualified. Males just aren't putting the paper in things with colleges. They always show you the bad things. There are many people, blacks, who are qualified out there and who can do the job. There just needs to be a better screening process. If you have to work harder, well, that's fine. But to appease both sides and to bring about a better change and more equal change, you need to justify and modify your system within screening.
On a personal level, I mean, beyond it, we've been talking outside of ourselves, but on a personal level, I mean, even if you look at dating and things like that, do you people, when you look at each other, do you see, each other as individuals, or do you still see that issue of race?
The way you're brought up. I think it's your environment. I think it's your environment and the way that you're raised. I know I was raised in a family where my mother's a public school teacher, and she's taught black students, and we've been raised with an attitude that we're all the same and that she teaches them. And my sister, we all went to Catholic school. We all went to a school where it was all white. And my sister went to a school where it was black students. And she's intermixed, and she's in the idea where there's busing and everything. And her attitude is different from mine. Whether or not I think we're all equal, but her attitude is different where she can't understand.
She's actually involved.
Yes, she's actually involved, and I think it's your environment. And that's why I think busing works in our area.
Okay, can you people, could you date someone of the opposite race? Would you?
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
Michelle?
with me, I run into trouble with people automatically assuming that just because I'm black, you have to introduce me to the darkest football player on the team. You can't introduce me to just any guy because he's a guy. I must have a black man just because my skin sets me off.
I think it's the same way, too, though, with
whites,
too.
yeah.
Like, they wouldn't introduce me to say, Toronto over here. I mean, if, you played on the basketball team, I'd say, introduce me to one of the guys on the basketball team. I wouldn't expect, I wouldn't know, but...
Okay, there are basic assumptions in that, Julie.
Yeah.
I was saying that with me, a personal problem that I had was I find that
now, you have gone out with a white guy.
Yes.
Okay.
And it wasn't the guy or the kids that have the problem. It's the parents that have trouble dealing with the fact that their son or their daughter is seeing someone that are romantically involved with someone of the opposite color or just a different person. I think it's the parents that are having trouble dealing with that problem right now. But the kids, because there has been that intermixing and integration, are finding it easier just to accept them as blacks as individuals and whites as individuals.
Kids are finding it easier, but even at the school even at your age, you still find racial slurs?
Oh, yes. All over.
Michelle?
I have been a varsity football manager for 2 years. And most of the time I do most of the heavy work if I don't have any assistant managers. Well, in particular, at one game, I had a lot of things in my hand, and there were 2 heavy water bottles, which I couldn't lift. And I asked this fellow, I said, get the water for me. And he stopped and said, what color do I look like I am? And I said, you look like you're green, so get the water. But implying that just because he was white, that meant that he was forbidden to lift things. I was so frustrated that I couldn't say what I really wanted to say, but I just said the first funny thing that came to my mind, and he did get the water. And that's a good off-color joke. Anytime 2 whites are together, and I've heard this often, one will say, get that for me. Do I look like I'm black?
Yeah,
I've
heard that.
But it works the other way, too. Like, at my school, all the cheerleaders are white, and when we go to...
No, sir. We got...
Okay.
Some of the cheerleaders are white.
We've got 3.
Yes.
3 out of...
All right, there are a lot of variations.
Some of the cheerleaders are white, and when the team goes to a school where most of let's say the basketball team is black and most of the other school's cheerleaders are black, they hear a lot of the same thing in reverse.
One girl got hit over the head.
Okay.
One girl physical abuse
we have
and all.
really run out of time in terms of trying to talk about some of these issues. I mean, I know each one of us here could continue to go on about our specifics wherever we're from. But the reality is we have to try to deal with what's causing it. And certainly by talking about it, some of these things have come out in terms of some frustrations and some feelings. But at least it's a start at dealing with some of the racial attitudes, why they occur, and where we're coming from. Thanks for sharing your views. I know it's difficult, but blacks, whites, and all races have got to begin to talk about that if we're to deal with these issues. Thank you for watching at home. If you have any comments or reaction to the issue of racial attitudes, please write to us here at Soapbox. Let us know what you think. See you next week for another segment of Soapbox.